Connor, how you doing, man? Thanks for the time.
I'm good. I didn't know if I was being played in for U2 to honor when Florida State ruled the world or when Tony Bennett ruled the ACC.
I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm doing, Connor, to be totally honest. But if I had told you back in August, beginning of August, that we're going to have a 5-1 and a 1-5 team, would you have thought that Duke was the 5-1 team?
Ooh, yeah. Not a chance. I mean, I didn't think they'd be 1-5.
Right.
I also had no inkling that Florida State would be this much of a disaster. So I was on with some Florida State guys yesterday on their podcast, and they were telling me how they feel like it's a bizarro world season, throwing it back to the Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. Worlds are colliding, opposite George, all of that
You're
stuff.
feeling independent, George.
So what has impressed you as we're now halfway through the season about the Blue Devils? Because they've had to deal with some injuries.
I think the most impressive thing is how their defense is they're playing a different style, but they're still sustaining. Like when it went from David Cutcliffe to Mike Elko, we expected the defense to improve because how could it not?
Right.
Under a defensive-minded head coach and where they were the last couple of years under Cut. I kind of expected, there was a new scheme, new coaches almost across the board on the defensive side of the ball. They lost. Their top 4 defensive linemen from last year were all gone. The 3 defensive tackles, 2 to the NFL, 1 to Virginia Tech, and 1 to Notre Dame. And their defense, they're better in some spots. They create so much more havoc behind the line of scrimmage, and it really throws a wrench into a lot of opposing game plans against them. And if you play good defense, you have a chance to win games. So it's really that side of the ball I hone in on as far as where I'm pretty impressed with what Manny has done through 6 games.
To me, you hit on the thing about Duke football that is the most surprising, that Duke, who had a legitimately good defensive line last year, and to me, that's the barometer as to whether or not you are a legitimately good football team. How are you on the defensive front? Like, I think anybody can recruit good offensive linemen. I've always said this. A school like Duke should be able to recruit good offensive linemen. The problem is a lot of the other schools want the really smart guys. I think, by and large, offensive linemen are like your smartest players on a football field. Why that is, I'm not sure. It just, to me, it's always been true. But defensive linemen, and that it was not meant as a backhanded slap at all, it's just harder. I mean, North Carolina, when was the last time North Carolina had 4 legitimately good defensive linemen? But Duke had it last year. And that was the biggest worry for me about their defense, was replacing that. And they have done, incredible work along the defensive front. They get in the backfield constantly. Is the offense as good as you thought the offense would be, or is it still just kind of figuring it out?
In spots, they're so inconsistent, and a lot of it has to do with the way they've started games. And it's not been every game that they started slow, but it's been the 2 ACC games. They were down 17-0 at halftime to Carolina. That's the microcosm of Duke's first half was Carolina was giving them a layup on the last play of the first half, and they couldn't even complete a pass for like 20 yards to just chew up clock and, get to midfield.
Right.
And then at Georgia Tech, they're down 10-0 early in the game and couldn't get things going offensively. So that's the one thing to look for tonight is how quickly can Duke start offensively. Can they actually connect on some early throws? It's going to take something different from Malik Murphy that we've seen so far. And I think it can happen. Against this Florida State defense, I think a lot of things can happen. Mm-hmm. But that's the one area that, it's when it's gotten rolling, their offense does look decent. Like they can run the ball behind a makeshift offensive line that, they didn't even have some of these guys until the summer.
Right.
it's just a matter of starting fast and finding a little bit more consistency.
Conor O'Neill, Deacons Illustrated, Devils Illustrated. I'm just reading at Conor O'Neill _DI. All right, let me just flip it to Wake. Is Wake getting better on the football field, or was that win over State? I mean, look, whatever happened last time out, but the win over State, it almost looked like they had turned a corner. But where is Dave Clawson's program right now?
I think Dave Clawson's program, a lot of the future is going to be decided in the next 6 games. I think we arrive at kind of this fork in the road where I don't think you would have expected, throw it back to August. I don't think you expected Wake to be 5-1 or even 4-2 at this juncture of the season with the guys they had on their schedule early in the year. Now, when you're talking about a second half of the schedule that includes UConn, Stanford, Cal, Carolina, and Duke in the Thanksgiving week game, you're talking about some coin flip games that if this team can improve and continue to be an ascending program, Dave's used that term a couple times this year. He kind of went into the season knowing that this wasn't going to be a 10-win team. This was going to be a team that needed to kind of stay on target and move forward through some early lumps. And so we're gonna find out a lot about Wake starting tomorrow in East Hartford, and then we're gonna find out even more about them next week when they go to Palo Alto.
Yeah, look, it's an ACC footprint game. That's a conference. Like what we were just talking to David Teal, and he was mentioning that this was such a shock to the administration at Virginia that the AD is on the West Coast. Like if they had known about it, I'm gonna guess the AD would have been at the press conference today. But she was on the West Coast, as I pointed out to Dave, well within the ACC's footprint. Conor O'Neill, at Conor O'Neill _DI for Deacons and also Devils Illustrated. Duke has a basketball game tomorrow, and I bring this up only because, well, not only, but partially because we talked to Julius Hodge, who is the head coach at Lincoln, and they'll be the opponent for the Blue Devils tomorrow afternoon. What is your sense right now where, like, how many guys is Jon Scheyer, not tomorrow because that's an exhibition, how many guys is Jon Scheyer legitimately going to play significant minutes?
I think Jon Scheyer goes into the season thinking he's got an 8 or 9 man rotation. I think you're looking at a freshman lineup that has, or a starting lineup that has 3 freshmen with the 2 returning guards, and then Con Knipple, Cooper Flagg, and Kamen Malawach.
Right.
You're bringing the transfer trio off the bench with Malik Brown, Mason Gillis, and Sion James. And then that 9th one is kind of the one in flux. Like, I want to see just how much they can get out of either Darren Harris or Isaiah Evans.
Right.
And then Patrick Ngongba, the freshman big, he's been sidelined with a foot injury. He had foot injuries in high school. He's the one that I don't expect to see very often this year. But I think Darren Harris can give them more than he gets credit for. He's more of a complete all-around player and a really good shooter than I think people realize. But yeah, I mean they brought in these transfers for a reason, and I don't see a guy who is the Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year, is a career 40% 3-point shooter in Mason Gillis, just giving you like 6 minutes a game in what is it? I think it's December 8th is their game at Louisville to open the ACC slate. I don't see Mason Gillis just playing a couple minutes here and there in that game. So,
yeah, that and Sion James is big, strong guard, and Brown from Syracuse, an elite defender. All these things that Duke has absolutely needed. Real quick, I don't know where you placed Wake. Wake was the only team in the ACC that got a first-place vote that wasn't named Duke or North Carolina from the ACC media, from the Media Day tip-off last week in Charlotte. And I don't know, a lot of people have tried to drum up the disrespect. I don't see it as disrespect because I don't know that there is a third team that had to be in the preseason top 25. I really don't. But do you see Wake as the third best team, or who would you challenge for that?
I think so. I did not have a vote, so I didn't have to go through the thought process in the last couple of weeks of doing this.
Good for you.
You have more knowns with Wake than I think you have, certainly comparing them to. I was kind of surprised Louisville was picked all the way down to 9th. I think they're going to be decent.
Right.
But you have more knowns because that's a totally remade roster. Not that voters would have known it at the time, but we know a lot more about Wake than we do with Virginia at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We know more about Wake than we do with Clemson because Clemson has some new pieces. And what's Chase Hunter's role going to be? Who's going to fill the PJ Hall void?
Right.
So with Wake, bringing back a first-team All-ACC guy with Hunter Salas, bringing back a 1,000-point scorer already with Cameron Hildreth, bringing back your 7-foot center in Afton Reed. You feel like, again, talk about Duke's depth. I mean, Wake is, I think, going to probably play 10 or 11 guys against Alabama tonight in a charity exhibition down in Birmingham. So it's a deep and talented roster for Steve. I think it's kind of a, if not now, when season for them.
Yeah.
It's his 5th year. They haven't been in the tournament. They've been knocking on the door, really pounding on the door 2 of the last 3 years. You can say knocking on it for 3 years now. So I think this is the one that breaks them through, and I think a top 4 finish in the ACC is certainly feasible.
Conor O'Neill, at Conor O'Neill _DI. I overcame a slow start. Thank you very much, Conor. I appreciate it, man. If you're going to the basketball game tomorrow night, tell Julius Hodge I said hi, and I wish I was there. But that's fine. He knows I can't be there. Conor, I appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Will do. Thanks, Adam.
Take care.